And we're back to freecodecamp, still JavaScript. We should be right here, Basic Algorithm Scripting. I went over this before and I've got my solutions ready so that I can solve it a little bit quicker in this tutorial. But for some I had to sit down and think a little bit, so don't worry if you can't see the solution right away. It's normal for most coding projects that you have to sit down a little bit until you can find a solution. As always, try it yourself and then look at my walkthrough if you get stuck. The solutions that I present are the ones that I could come up with. There are always multiple ways to solve it. Let us dive right in with convert Celsius to Fahrenheit. A formula for it is given, so we'll pass 30 as an argument, which is Celsius, and we want to convert it to Fahrenheit. And in simple terms, we need to use this 30, apply the formula that's given, and then store it in the variable Fahrenheit. Let me just paste the formula here, Celsius times 9 divided by 5 plus 32. So we can use Celsius, our parameter, times 9 divided by 5, and afterwards plus 32. And this needs to be stored right here in Fahrenheit, so I copy paste it. And then we should already be good. Let me print it out so that we can see it. So console.log, and as this one, and now we have 86. So 30 degrees Celsius is 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And this should be correct. Let me run it. And we can move on to reverse a string. So what we want to do is we'll take a string and then take the first letter, make it the last, and so forth. We just flip it around. So for example, hello would be ole. And howdy would be hydro. We want to return the reverse string. Unstring is our parameter right here. Maybe I'll call it, let's say, reversed str, something like this. We have to declare this new variable, so let reversed str. And we can use, let's say, for loop. Let me first add the basic outline. So let I equal 0, this is our counter. And we need to have some length, and then I++. Inside, we want to add something to our reversed str variable, and this should be the string. So hello in this case with an index of I, and we make it plus equals. But we want to start at the last position. So instead of I equals 0, we need I equals str.length. But -1, as the index always starts at 0, and therefore the last position -1 will actually be the last letter of the word. And it should stop when we have reached 0. So as long as I is bigger than 0, our for loop will continue. But we actually want to have equal to 0. And then we need to set I --, so we want to decrement it, not increment it. Let me use console.log to show you what's now happening inside of our loop. So we can already see it. We have undefined before, but it's going to vanish. So don't worry about it, but we can already see we'll start with the O in hello, then the L, and the next L, and so forth. And we obviously need to make this an empty string, so our reverse string needs to be initialized right here. And if I now print it, you can see we've got O or L for the next iteration, then OLL for the third iteration, and so forth. And when we've reached ole, which is the full reverse of hello, our loop stops as I is now -1 and therefore not bigger or equal to 0 anymore. If we get rid of the plus sign right here, you can see that we only get the last letter stored in our reversed str. So don't forget the plus sign before the equal right here. Let me just paste a more complex argument, like greetings from Earth. And this also works. So this is one solution for this task. Let us go to factorialize a number. Here's an example given if you don't know anymore what factorialize means. So 5 factorialized would be equal to 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5. So 120. So this is what this exclamation mark stands for in math. We're actually using a5 as an argument, and we want to return the factorial. Let me just call it like this. So the end result will be returned. We got to declare this variable, and let me initialize it, set it to 0. Then we need a for loop. Again, I'll give it the usual outline, and then we go over all of these different elements and adjust them according to our needs. Inside, we'll use our factorial, and we'll use our counter I, and this time we'll multiply it. So multiply equal to I. Now let's check all of these elements. At first, we want to compare our counter to the num, which is 5 in our case. And we need it smaller or equal to num. Let me use console log to show you what all of this does. If I now use it, we have zeros. And the simple reason is we've set it to 0, not just the I, but also the factorial. And if you multiply anything by 0, the result is 0. So we need to fix that. So let me set I and factorial to 1. And now it already works. So 120 is our result. If we set it to 0, you can see we've got whatever number we've got times 0 equals 0. So this is why we have 1s for factorial and let I. Let me use, for example, 20. And it also works. And we increment our counter I for each iteration by 1 until it is bigger than num, and then it stops. So in our example with 5 as an argument, it would stop when I becomes 6. And then we would have our factorial returned, which would be 120 at this point. Let us move on to find the longest word in a string. Got a couple of examples, and we don't want to return the word itself, but the length of it. You can see that in the examples in the tests section on the left hand side. So look at the second test where it says jumped. This has 6 letters and is the longest word in our argument, so it should return 6. Then force is the longest one, it should return 5, and so forth. A simple solution would be we'll use mathmax. So it is going to find the biggest number for us. str is our parameter. We use the spread operator. So .str, then .split. I want to split it where we have white space. And then we'll use map. And let us just call it word. So for each individual word, we create this variable and we use word.length. And this should be the solution. Let us go over this step by step. So I can once again use console.log to show you what all of this does. So at first we have our str, which is this entire sentence. So it is now printed. I now use this again, and I use the spread operator. It's going to spread it out. It becomes more obvious why we need that if I add the split to it. So I split it right here at these white spaces, and if I get rid of the spread operator, we would get an array. And this is not what we want, so this is why we've used the spread operator. And now afterwards, we'll use map. And this is going to find the word.length of every word that we've spread out. So instead of the words, we now have numbers that resemble the length of each word. The is, for example, 3, quick is 5, brown is 5, and so forth. And by using math.max, we'll find the highest or the biggest number. And in this case, this would be 6, which is the length of jumped. So this is the way I've solved it. And if you go through it step by step, you can see why it works. Let us move on to return largest numbers in arrays. So we're going to find yet again the largest number, but this time we want to have multiple. So for each array that's nested inside of a bigger array, we want to have the largest one returned. So it's a multi-dimensional array that we are using here. You can, for example, check the tests below. So let's check this one here. So we'll pick 25, 48, 21 and minus 3, which are the largest numbers or the biggest numbers in every sub-array. So this is what we now need to build. And as we have a nested, so a multi-dimensional array, we need an outer and an inner loop. So it's about nested loops now. Let me first declare our return variable. I'll call it result, and it's going to be an array. Then I create the outer loop. Again, we'll start with the basic outline. For the length, we want to check our array, which is the parameter, so ARR. And inside we'll nest the second loop to cycle through all of these sub-arrays. So this, for example, 4513 would be the first sub-array where I equals 0, and then we use j as a counter to go through this sub-array. We use ARR.length, but in this case we use ARR with an index of I. This I is the counter of the outer loop. And j is the counter for the inner loop. And then we want to check which is the biggest number in each, and then store it in results. Let's go to the outer loop first. Let me declare biggest number right here. It's ARR at position I, and then 0. You have to declare this outside of the inner loop, so now we can use it here. And we want to use an if statement inside. So if the actual number or the current number is bigger than the biggest number, we want to set it to the number that we're checking, which is ARR with an index position of I and j. So for the condition, we only have to set this now ARR I and j, which is the current number, is bigger than biggest number. We want to set this current number ARR with index I and j to biggest number. And then we want to set our result to the biggest number. It should be this position right here. Let me check it if I've made any typos. And it works. So let's go over this once again. We've got the outer loop to go through this entire array, which has the counter I, and then comes the inner loop, which goes through the sub-arrays with a counter of j. And the biggest number stores each of these biggest numbers in the sub-arrays. And if the current number that we're checking is bigger than the biggest number, the current number is set to the biggest number right here with the if statement. And then the biggest number is passed to our result. It's an array. And finally, this array is then returned. Nested loops can be a little bit confusing. But let us once again use console.log. So we've got 4, 13, 32, and 1000, which are the first numbers in each subarray. So for now we haven't yet done much. So we only went through the first position, the first index position. But if we use this inside of our if statement, you can now see it finds the biggest number. So again, maybe you want to pause the video and check it for yourself, try to understand it. Let's go to confirm the ending. And this time we want to have a Boolean returned. We want to check if our target is the ending of our str. Let's check the test and it becomes more obvious what that means. First test would be Bastion and n. So n is the ending of Bastion, therefore it's true. Congratulation and on is also true, as on is the ending of congratulation. Corner and n would be wrong, as n is not the ending of corner. So this is what we now have to build. Bastion is our str, and target is n. We can solve it like this. So return, we use our str and slice it. And we use str_length to find the slice position minus target.length. So n would have a target length of 1. Let me check if I made any typos here. No, I haven't. Now we'll go over it step by step. So str.length would be 7 and n would be a length of 1. So we would slice it at the 6th position, which is the A in Bastion, so the second A. And then we would check if what is left is equal to target. So after the second A in Bastion, we only have an n, and this is equal to n, our target, therefore true will be returned. And this is what this code line does. We'll move on to repeat a string. So again, we have two parameters, a string and a number. And we want to repeat the string as often as the number wants us to. So star 3 times would be 3 stars, ABC 3 times would be 3 times ABC, and so forth. We shouldn't use the repeat method. So let us solve it differently. We want to return the repeat str. I'll declare it right here. It's not supposed to be a number, but a string, so let me make it a string like this. For now it's empty. And I use a for loop. And we use the num to check our counter I. Then we use our variable repeated string. And we set it to str, but we need the plus sign right here. And this should already be it. So what we have here, let me use console.log once again. So first iteration, we have ABC, our str added to repeated string. And if we forget this plus sign, it would just replace it, but we want to add it. So you need the plus sign. And num is 3 in our case, so I must be smaller than num. And after the third iteration, it would be equal to num, therefore the loop stops. So this was an easier one. Let's go to truncate a string. So we want to shorten a string based on a number, which is the maximum string length. And then we want to add these 3 dots. So this is not a spread operator. Instead, you can see it in the tests. For example, a tisket and so forth with an 8 would stop after the 8 position, which would be right here after the first a tisket, and then we add these 3 dots as an ending. And for 11 Peter, keep in mind the white spaces are counted as well. So Peter Piper right here would be 11 and then 3 dots. Let's start right here. We'll use our str.length, bigger num, and if it is bigger, we use str.slice at position 0, so at the start. and we'll end at num. And now we shouldn't forget our 3 dots, so plus in quotation marks 3 dots. And if it's not, so if our str.length is not bigger than num, we want to return the actual string. So we'll just add str right here. I haven't made any typos, so let's go over this again. Our str.length determines the entire length of our string. Let me show you in detail what it is. But we have to paste this obviously before our return, so that we can see something. So let me put that right here. So str.length is 43, which is the entire length of this sentence. Then we compare that to our num, which is 8 in this case. Therefore str.length is bigger than num, and we are right here after the question mark. We use str.slice. Let me show you what that does. So str.slice. At position 0 we'll start. So right at the beginning where the A is, and we'll end where it says num. So num is set to 8, therefore it stops here at 8 tisket. And then afterwards we'll add our 3 dots. Let's just say that our number is bigger than our str.length, then we would just return the string. So let me just make this, I don't know, like 44. And this would then return our entire str. So let's move on to finders keepers. What have we got here? We want to look through an array. We want to return the first element that passes the test for the func parameter. Let's check the test right here. Alright, so there's this remainder operator, the percentage symbol. And the first one that passed the test would be 8 in the first test, and the second one will be undefined as no element inside of the array passes this test. In the example given, the second element, the 2, would pass the test. So this should be returned. We'll use for yet again. We'll compare our counter to the array length. And num is what we want to return. And this is supposed to be the ARR at index position I. But we only want to do that under a certain condition. So we'll use an if statement. And here's our function. So we can use this parameter and add it to our if condition. And then we'll pass the num to it. So if this condition is true for the number that's passed, and number is set to the array position I, we will return the num, and otherwise it's going to be undefined. I haven't made any typos, So again, our number is set to 0 at the start. And it's going to be set to the array elements at the counter I index, but only if they pass true with the function. So in this case, the remainder of 2 equals 0. And if that's not the case, we want to return undefined. So there are cases where no elements meet this criteria or result in true with the function. So we're good here. Let's move on to boo-who. We want to check if a value is classified as a Boolean primitive. So true and false would be true, and basically everything else would be false. So we want to simply check the type of the argument that's passed to our function, and we can use typeof for that. So this should be the most simplistic solution that I can think of, at least. So we set typeof bool, our parameter, and check if it's Boolean. Let me use console.log and show you directly. We'll use typeof here. And you can see null is an object. And if we set that to, let's say, false, we have it Boolean. And Boolean is strictly equal to the text Boolean in the return code line 3. Therefore, it would return true. If we set it to number, it's false again, and so forth. So this should be the easiest way to solve this task. Originally it was null, so I'll run the tests and we're good here. Title case is sentence. So here we can use to upper and to lower case. And we want to capitalize every word, at least the first letter of it, and then lowercase all of the letters that come after the first. So we simply have to find a way to isolate all of these words and then isolate the first letter from the rest in each, and then put it back together. So the solution that I could come up with is to declare a new variable. Let me call that new sentence or something like this. And this is our str. We'll split it. And we'll split it at the white space. And let me declare another variable. I call it updated sentence. And I'll make it an array. And now we'll use for again. But in this case, it's not a regular for loop. It's this for in loop. So for let's say word in new sentence. We want to have this loop to perform something. Use our updated sentence variable. Paste the new sentence. And we'll add our word inside of the updated sentence. So for each word inside of it, we're going to adjust the new sentence. Set it to word. And index 0. I will make that uppercase. So this is the first letter in every word. And then we'll have to add the rest. So again, new sentence of every word. But now we don't want to have the 0 position, we want to have everything after 0, so we can use slice with a value of 1. So it's going to slice it at the second letter of each word and then to lowercase. Let me check. Oh, at first I need to fix these typos. Now we're good here. But we don't want to return the str. Obviously we want to return our new version and not the parameter or the regular argument that we've used. We want to return our updated sentence. But we want to also join it again. And now it should be good. Let us debug it once again with console.log. So the first split that we've done was at the white space. So this gives us every word as a single element inside of a new array. Our updated sentence for now is empty, but then we go to our for in loop. And we use every word inside of it. Let me add it right here. We use the updated sentence and you can see the first letter now has a capital first letter. And we have to join it afterwards to have a sentence again and not an array returned. This is why we've used join at the end. You can see that right here if I add it to console log, it turns this array into a simple string again. So this is why we've used it. And again, inside of the for in loop, we've used new sentence, every word of it at index 0, so the starting letter, and turned it uppercase. And afterwards we've sliced it to get rid of the first letter, and this is all lowercase. Let's move on to slice and splice. This time we've got 3 parameters inside of our function. We're going to use 2 arrays and then put them together at a specific position that's defined by n. Let us check the first example under tests. So it takes the second array, 4, 5 in this case, and then places the first array inside at the position n, in this case that's 1. Maybe the second test makes that a little bit clearer. So we got 1, 2 and AB, and at position 1 we want to put them together, so it results in A, which is the index 0, and B is the index 1, and therefore we have A, 1, 2 and then B. So I think the first 2 tests, they give us an idea of what's needed. So we want to return a new array, and we want to set this new array to arr2.slice. Slice doesn't really look like it would change anything, but I'm going to show you later why we need that. Let me just show you console.log with arr2 and arr2.slice. It's the same, but slice leaves arr2 unaffected. And this is why we need that. if I just do it like this, so I set the new array to AR2, and now I splice my new array. We need to splice it depending on n, so that's the position. We set it to 0 because we don't want to take away elements, and then we place ARR1 inside. So this is correct. Well, let me add the spread operator. But we still don't pass the final test, as the second array should remain the same after the function runs. And if I show you ARR2 and new array right here with console.log, you can see they are now the same. So this is what splicing does. And to pass the final test, we need to use a slice up front on ARR2. And now watch what happens in a second. Console.log at the bottom. If I add a slice in the second code line, you can now see right here it leaves ARR2 unaffected. So this is why you need this method in the second code line, so don't forget it. The end position, once again, it determines where we are going to splice it. 0 means that we are not going to take anything out at this position, and AR1 is what we add. And if we leave out the spread operator, we would place the array inside of an array to have a multi-dimensional array. We don't want that, so we'll have to use the spread operator. And this is how I solve this exercise. Let's move on to Falsy Bouncer. It removes all falsy values from an array and returns a new array. We want to leave the original array unaffected. ARR is our parameter, or we can just filter it with Boolean, and we're already good. So what does that do? It just checks all of the values that are given in the ARR. So in our case 7, 8, 0, false, and 9. And it's going to filter it. So if we use a console.log before filtering it, we've got the entire ARR. But if we use it with this filter, let me show you what then happens. So we'll set the filter to Boolean. And now false and empty are filtered out. So all of these falsy values that are given false, null, 0, empty, undefined, and not a number are not part of the array anymore. And this is what the Boolean does. If we set it to number, for example, it would only filter out these numbers, which are 7 and 9. So there's a simple method for achieving what we need here. Let's go to where do I belong. We want to return the lowest index at which a value should be inserted into an array. Once the array has been sorted. Alright, So we've got an example right here. Get index to ints. 1.5 is between 1 and 2. So it should be inserted right here at index position 1, and 1 should be returned. Second example, 23.5 will be reordered to 3.5.20, and then 19 would be put in the second index position. So at first we want to order our array, and then we want to reposition our num inside of it accordingly. So we want to check if it's bigger or smaller than the individual numbers. Let me use yet again a filter. I'll define a value, and if number is bigger than value, we want to place the number after it. Let me show you with console.log how this is done. We've got 40 and 60 in our array. And then we've used the filter method. And we have filtered everything out that is smaller than the number. We've filtered everything out that's bigger than the number, and we've left everything that's smaller than it. And afterwards we can just use .length, because our number will be the last position in our array, and therefore the length will be our index position. So by using this filter, we have only 40 left. If I had 35, we had 2 elements left, and so forth. Let me add, for example, an 80, and this would be filtered out. And 50 will be placed right after the 40. And by using length, we'll directly find the correct position. And we don't have to use length -1. Because the number itself is never really placed inside of the array that we are filtering. So in our case, our array would only have the number 40, and if we check the length for an array with only one element, we'll get 1, and 50 would be placed at the index position of 1. Therefore, we don't have to use length -1 or anything. Let's go to the next one, which is called Mutations. So we'll check if a certain combination of words is part of a given combination of words. For example, hello and hello would be true. Hello and hey would be false, as there is no y in hello. Line and alien would be correct, as line can be found in alien, but in a different combination, but all of the letters are inside of alien. We want to return a Boolean value, so let me return true. I'll declare a new variable. Let me just call that test, so this is the test combination of letters, in our case hey, that we're going to use. We call that test letters, so something like this. And the other one will be our target letters. So this is the hello part of our array here. Test letters will therefore be ARR with an index position of 1. And target letters is AR with an index position of 0. Or we can directly use 2 lowercase for each, to make sure that we don't run into problems with upper and lowercase. Now we'll use a for loop to check the individual letters. We'll start with the basic outline yet again. So let I equal 0. We want to compare I to some length. And we can directly use our test letters dot length. And we want to increment it. Inside of our for loop, we'll use an if statement. And the condition is our target letters. Index of test letters with the position of I is smaller than 0. Let me check. I need to put a bracket right here. And then we want to return false. This should be the solution. I haven't made any typos. Let's go over this again. So the first 3 code lines are clear, I would say. But then the for loop might cause some confusion and the if inside. So we've got our target letters, which would be the hello in our case. And I is our placeholder for the index position. So we'll check test letters at a certain index position. Let's start with 0. So it would be H for our test letters. And if this is found, the index position must be 0 or bigger. And if this is not found, the index position would be -1. And then we would have false returned. So in our case, we have hello and a hey. Our for loop, it cycles through H, E, and Y for each iteration. So we've got 3 in total. And the last one is the Y. And Y for test letters I equals 2 would not be found in target letters. Therefore, it would return -1. And therefore, return false would be given. And this is how you can solve, or this is one way you can solve this task. Let us move on to Chunky Monkey. And I believe that's the last one. We want to split an array into groups. The length is defined by size. So we've got a one-dimensional array, and then we want to create a multi-dimensional array. And we want to specifically return a two-dimensional array. And the length of each array inside of it, so the nested ones, are determined by the size number. So for example here, 2 would be AB and then CD, 3 would be 0, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, and so forth. Let's return a new array. We'll declare it. I've solved it using a while loop. While our array.length is bigger than 0, our loop will run. And our new array will store the new information, and I've simply used a push method. So every element of the given array will just be passed to the new array, and I've used Splice for it. You start splicing at the 0 position, and then you use size for the elements to be spliced. So in our case we've got 2, therefore A would be the 0 position. We have 2 elements, so A and B, that would be spliced and that will be pushed to new array. And after the first iteration, our array.length is still 2, so it's still bigger than 0. It contains only C and D now, and this would then be pushed to our new array. After the second iteration, our array would be a length of 0 as it doesn't contain any elements anymore, and therefore the while loop doesn't continue. So let me show you here, console.log. If I place it before the push and the splicing, we've got an empty array. The first iteration of the while loop starts and it pushes a and b to it. Then our console.log is shown again. It shows the new array only, therefore we have in the third console.log print line another AB. And then finally C and D are pushed to our new array. And then the old array ARR is equal to 0 in length, as it doesn't contain elements anymore, and therefore the while loop is broken. So after the second iteration it is unequal bigger to 0, and this is why this works. And yes, that was the last task. So we are done with yet another course section here. Next up is object-oriented programming. As always, I try to solve it for next week. I hope this video was helpful in general. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.